All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here bring our 2025 preview and prediction for the SMU Mustangs. Look at this coaching staff. Rhett Lashley enters his fourth year of a nice 29-12 record. Rob Likens, Casey Wood will be splitting the offensive coordinator duties. And then entering his fourth year will be Scott Simons as the defensive play caller. Top 50 this offseason in terms of high school and portal ranks. And then the phenomenal debut season in the conference, finishing runner-up on a last-second field goal to Clemson. Ended up getting exited in the first round of the CFP, but a nice 11-win campaign for the Mustangs. Getting things started with this offense. Obviously, this is a phenomenal group all year long, and under Lashley, that's always going to be expected. Now they turn around and return 6 starters with a little bit of portal work, about 8 guys they snagged this offseason. Of course, we're going to start with Kevin Jennings, a guy that battled with Preston Stone, who, a couple years back was a phenomenal starter for SMU, but they liked the upside of Jennings a little bit more. They pretty much forced him into action. They eventually ended up getting the starting nod completely. This is a guy who's a crafty runner, due to being a good athlete who can make plays on the move. More of a pocket passer, though, instead of being a real dual threat, so let's not get that too confused. He's a smooth downfield thrower, throws a beautiful spiral, really good touch, has nice arm strength. A lot of his best plays, though, were go routes, slants, throws on the run. We need to see him expand his game a little bit. He also had 11 interceptions, 6 of them coming 2 road games versus tougher defenses, that being Duke and Penn State. So needs to be more poised, less rattled, needs to expand his game a little bit, and I think he certainly can in year 2 of starting, Nick. And even though Jennings had some nice plays last year, some nice stats, I was not all that impressed due to the confines of the system. And of course, on the road, again, he did not look all that great. I definitely think the upside is there, and I think he'll look a lot better in 25.
The jury is still certainly out on Kevin Jennings, in my opinion. I think he's a quarterback that's got a lot of high upside potential, but there is some concerns. I'll start with the positives. 65% comp rate on 380 attempts, I think, is pretty solid. 3,200 yards passing, 23 touchdowns is pretty solid. A 6.1% TD ratio, I think, is a really solid. TD to pass ratio is pretty solid. In terms of the legs as well, had 100 attempts on the ground for 354 yards and 5 scores, so not bad numbers there. But then I think the biggest issue is, sometimes he gets rattled under pressure. He is sheltered by the system, and the 11 interceptions was pretty poor. About a 3% interception percent ratio to attempts, which is not really ideal. You want to see that probably get a little bit closer to 2.52% there. So, sometimes there was some iffy showings with throwing the ball there. There were some games that he just looked a little dodgy in. I think this is a kid that's going to learn the system, be a little bit better here. I think at 6 foot 185 is a very interesting body type for this type of offense. Brett Lashley is a great offensive mind. He knows what he's doing, dialing up the offense. But I do think when you highlight those Penn State and Duke games on the road, they were pretty atrocious, right? 54% comp rate against Duke, 258 and 3 picks and then 1 touchdown. Same deal against Penn State, 55% comp rate, 195, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. That was a tough environment, just didn't really show out. But there were a lot of positive moments as well. Had a slow start to the season when he got put into the offense, but I think, you looked at some of those games in late November where he was really, completing at a high clip, 68% against BC, 75% against Virginia, and 66% against Cal. All those games were really solid. Got to find a way to cut down on the turnovers. Certainly, I think that's a big potential red flag for this offense, but I think Jennings adds a wrinkle that you can kind of work with. I think he's really solid on the ground. He showed a lot more tendency to run and be a part of the offense in that regard, which I think is a really key thing here for Rhett Lashley and company. Yeah, the jury's still out. I think that's the way I'm going to look at Kevin Jennings. I think he profiles as a potential high upside quarterback, but there's still some weaknesses in his game that he's got to polish out.
Let's go ahead and look at this running back room, which I consider the weakness of this offense. Rashad Smith departs after a phenomenal year. I think he's going to be a great player in the pros as well. But obviously that's going to leave them with a bit of a void. Derek McFall mainly got on the field versus the FCS opponent they played last year. Used his red shirt, so expected to contend for lots of reps this year. Chris Johnson Jr., the son of the NFL star that most of us grew up watching, transfers in from Miami. 2 quiet years there after being a 3-star out of high school. I love the addition of TJ Harden from UCLA. Physical runner, good ball security and speed at 220 pounds. I think he'll do very well this year. That's if, the 3 guys, I think with this rotation, the 3 guys, they should be fine. I don't think, again, it's a bit of a strength for them, but I guess we'll wait and see. I think the run game could certainly falter a little bit. But again, the scheme's so nice that they should be productive. I'm not expecting overall great playmaking, though, and it's certainly going to be a fall off compared to what they had last year with Smith.
Yeah, the running back room is certainly the weakest part of this offense. I do think, with the way the system is run here, it's really not the biggest concern in the world for me. 55th in the nation last year running the ball. Going to probably have a by-committee approach with the 3 running backs plus Kevin Jennings. I think McFall showed me some burst in those games against some of those lower-tier opponents as a guy that could be really solid. TJ Harden was really good at UCLA at times, 500 yards for him on the ground last year, 2 scores. 2023 hit a phenomenal season, 820 yards on the ground, 5.3 yards per attempt, and 8 touchdowns in that campaign. He should be really solid. Chris Johnson Jr. obviously has that high-level pedigree from his father playing in the NFL, a phenomenal player for the Tennessee Titans. So I think he's a guy that can still develop and be solid come the end of the day. And then Jennings' leg certainly helps out as well. Yes, it's a weaker unit in the conference, certainly, but I don't think it's going to be a total liability due to the system they play. But something to keep an eye on. If they struggle those first couple weeks running the ball, maybe it will be indicative of bad things that come for this offense.
Now look at the pass-catching group last year. The wide receiver core was one of the deepest in the country. They did get hit by a bit of the injury bug, and you probably didn't notice much fall-off, though, because they were that deep. You're going to get back Romello Brinson, had 400-plus yards in 2023. Was set to be an important rotational pass catcher last year, but, of course, he also got injured. The vet's going to be tasked with taking on a big role this year. Jordan Hudson, 400-plus yards last fall himself. He's a speedy guy that should also see some more targets. Yamir Knight had a strong season for James Madison last year, 600-plus yards, 0 drops on 63 targets, so that's going to be a reliable player. Dylan Goffney, added from Colorado State. He started his career here at SMU, so he's back in Dallas, but he's familiar with this system, so a bit of an underrated guy for them. It's going to command targets. They added 4 pass catchers in this freshman class as well. They also returned a very important tight end in R.J. Maryland that pretty much nobody knows about because nobody really paid attention to SMU till late in the year. This guy had 162 yards in that week 1 win over Nevada. I think it was actually week 0, but nonetheless, they're going to be glad to have him back. Very valued, I would say, in terms of another potential CFP run's going to be R.J. Maryland. And I also think Matthew Hibner. He was actually really good in relief as he stepped into that tight end 1 role back half of the season. Had a 100-yard game as well, sprinkled in there. He's going to be the tight end too. So I think this is another year where they're incredibly deep. I think the portal ads are nice. Plenty of guys, plenty of targets to go around here.
Yeah, I think this is a great tight end room, actually, that kind of leads off a wide receiver room that has some interesting bodies in it. Hibner was really solid in relief, 368 for him, 15.3 yards to grab, and 4 scores, while RJ Maryland had basically similar stats prior to his injury as well, 359 for him, 15 yards to grab, and 4 scores. Really impressive out of the 2 tight ends there. Jordan Hudson was a good player for this team, 420 for him, 10.8 yards to grab, and 5 scores. I like what he can return. Romello Brinson, being fully healthy is a very key part of this offense. They bring in Yamir Knight, who was really good at JMU, a very talented player out of Delaware. 600 yards on the receiving for him, 11.4 yards to grab. 4 touchdowns. He's really solid, good hands. Dylan Goffney comes back after previously being there. He was good at SMU in 2023, 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in that campaign. A solid player that returns. They added a bunch of different freshmen that they're pretty high on. Daylon Singleton, Jalen Cooper, some of the guys they're high on. Centarius Brown's another one they think could be pretty solid come the end of the season. Isaiah Robinson, another guy they're high on. So a lot of bodies here, a lot of depth. I think there's some guys that could certainly break out. The pass game should be a strength for this offense.
Now look at the offensive line for the Mustangs. They're going to return both starters on the left side. Savion Byrd at left tackle was quite poor in pass block. He was a good run blocker, though, 6'5", 304 pounds. And Logan Parr's back at the guard spot, on the other hand, was a phenomenal player in pass blocking, while being just average in the run game. The only other returning starter is going to be P.J. Williams, our right tackle, who was great for them all year in all regards. Transfers are going to occupy center and right guard. Joshua Bates barely played in 2 years at Oklahoma. Addison Nichols was great for Arkansas as the starting center this past season, though, so I love the addition there. Veteran Nate Anderson saw nearly 200 snaps at 3 different spots across the offensive line, and he's going to be a top backup. The Mustangs' offensive line was pretty good last season. If the transfers can play good ball, they're going to be in good shape. Byrd needs to be much better in effort of not being a full liability, kind of like he was last year at times. They also picked up Zion Nelson, who hasn't played since 2022, back at Miami, reuniting with Rhett Lashley due to numerous surgeries, who at one point was one of the best left tackles in college football. I doubt he's going to regain that form. I don't even know if he's going to play this year, Nick, but if he can come in there and provide some good action, that could be an underrated addition as well. So we're certainly praying and hoping that he can get on the field in some capacity after, a tough past couple of years. Nonetheless, though, offensive line, they're in good shape.
Zion Nelson, certainly an interesting name on this roster. Him and Tyler Van Dyke are both on this roster. Tyler Van Dyke, of course, was previously a quarterback at Miami before being at Wisconsin last year and getting hurt. But those are 2 guys that have veteran leadership. I'm assuming both Nelson and Van Dyke are trying to transition into coaching roles. I think they're 2 solid veteran guys around to have around your program. Don't hate having that veteran experience at all. Savion Byrd, who came over from Oklahoma, struggled at times, but still I think there's some high upside for him at left tackle. Logan Parr is a pretty solid player. Nate Anderson will certainly fight for some reps at left guard. guard and be solid there. Joshua Bates was not great at Oklahoma, but he's hoping to plug in and get some more experience at center. As Addison Nickel comes in from Arkansas, who I thought was quite impressive at times. PJ Williams is a solid starter as well. This O-line, I think it's good. I think it's a decent enough unit here. I like what they have. If Bird can improve his pass protection as well as the center and right guard that are new to the or center and left guard, center and right guard that are new to the program, can gel with that left guard Logan Parr who's been around the program. I think this could be a solid offensive line coming in the season.
Now we go ahead and look at the offensive verdict. The Mustangs' offense is really good ones. Jennings operates the system well, has talent around him. That deep group is now a little bit thinner, and they won't be as deep. Being in the Power 4 can certainly cause issues, especially if the offensive line takes a slight step back. I think this will be a good offense. I certainly see them being weaker in all areas, though, Nick, not as dominant as last fall. Still going to give them an A-, though. So that's not disrespectful one bit. I think this offense will be phenomenal. I just don't expect them to be as great as last year.
Yeah, I like what we have here. I think this is a solid unit overall. I think Kevin Jennings is a good player who showed some in spurts last year, but there's still some concerns with me. I'm keeping my eye on him. He's a player that I think could certainly boom or bust. I like the wide receiver room, a lot of different bodies there. The tight end room is really solid as well. The running back room, they'll use a rotational approach. I think they'll kind of negate some of my concerns. Still a weaker unit in the conference. And then, of course, the offensive line, I think, has some interesting pieces that could develop well coming into the season. Rhett Lashlee offense is always going to put up points. Expect them to be top 10 in points per game again this year. I like the piece they have here.
They move to the defensive side of the ball. This is it was very good last year. It's something I noted for a couple of years continuously is how well SMU had improved on the defensive side of the ball, and they just continued to do that for a big stretch here, and that's what has them at a pretty respectable level. They're going to return 4 starters. The only starter back up front, though, Cameron Robertson. He was a great pass rusher, did work versus the run. I think he's going to take his protection to the next level now with more responsibilities. Isaiah Smith wasn't exactly a starter, but he was the top rotational guy, 450-plus snaps. Was a good run defender, had 6.5 sacks as well. You have Ja'Kai Lang, saw 150 snaps in Missouri. Trey Smith saw some solid action in 2 years at Baylor. DJ Warner played about 200 reps for Kansas, but was no good last year. So those are some of the guys that they're going to add from the portal. Billy Walton barely played, a redshirt sophomore. He returns from last year's squad. The interior defensive line, they're going to get back a good player, Jonathan Jefferson, 6'3", 315, was a pretty impressive run defender. Was also a rotational player, though. The rest of the group is also going to be transfer heavy. You look at a guy like Jeffrey Mba, got on the field for 600 snaps last year for Purdue and was below average. Terry Webb's a really good 2-year starter at Texas State. Pretty good pass rusher as well for being 6'3", 314. I think he's good against the run. Damaj Lewis, a 280-pounder from Purdue as well. Cavante Spears was a starter in 2023 for Memphis, but wasn't that good and only saw marginal reps last year. A big step back across the board for the defensive lines expected. They're not as deep or as talented last year, Nick. This was a phenomenal D-line, one of the best in the country. People laughed at me when I said that before the game against Penn State. Penn State could not generate really much of anything on the ground in that playoff game. I know they didn't really have to. They're still held to under 200 yards, though. And they certainly gave that offensive line a bit of fits. I think they did their job, and this certainly was one of the best D-lines in the country. I don't want to debate anybody on that one.
Yeah, the run defense was phenomenal last year, but I do think they'll take a step back because I don't think the transfers really address the needs and replace the players they lost. They, gave up just over 100 yards per game last year. They grabbed 100.2, 7th in the nation, a top 10 unit in that regard. They're really solid against the run, and a lot of it comes down to the deep rotation that they had. But a lot of those guys that were rotation pieces last year now are your top guards, and they got top guys. They got to step up. Isaiah Smith, 32 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. He's a great player. Cam Robertson, 32 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Those two guys, they got to be dynamite this year. They're going to have to be big names and really produce for this team. Jonathan Jefferson as well, 17 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Billy Walton, 11 total tackles and 1 tackle for loss for him. He's got to be good this year as well. I look at some of the names they add out of the portal. Terry Webb's a bigger body who could be really solid. 6'3", 315 is intriguing at that size. 26 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 3 QB hurries at Texas State last year. A very intriguing add. Jeffrey Mba was previously in the SEC at Auburn, but hasn't done a whole lot at there or Purdue. He had 30 total tackles last year and a tackle for loss. Interesting guy to add to your roster. Ja'Kai Lang from Missouri didn't do a ton for them, but he did have 3 sacks and 13 total tackles. Could be involved. Jamar Lewis as well comes over from Purdue. He had 14 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss. He's another bigger guy there, 6'4", 285. He could be interesting as well for this team. Overall, I think this is a unit that's going to take a step back here. I do like some of the players they have. I like, the fact that they went and addressed that they needed to replace those players. I just don't know if I trust the guys they added out of the portal to play at the same level they played at last year.
Now you move to the middle of this defense that saw 2 outstanding linebackers who are now going to depart. as both starters are gone, but Alexander Kilgore is primed and ready to step into the spotlight. He only missed 3 tackles and nearly 400 snaps last year. Was a good run defender, so I think he's going to be a penciled-in elite player for them. Zakai Barker was a starter for ECU last season. Was pretty good in coverage, but struggled in all other areas. Akil Washington was a standout edge run defender for South Alabama last year. Listed as a linebacker, 234 pounds, so he can probably play in the middle. Most likely might be at defensive end, though I'm not really sure what his role is going to be for 2025. Justin Medlock, Brandon Mazzano, Brandon Booker only saw a couple snaps each last year, so the inexperience is certainly there and evident regarding the backups. But I think they're going to be fine when it comes to Baker and Kilgore, Nick, as the starters. They're replacing guys who are multi-year starters, though, in the lineup, so that's certainly going to be felt.
Yeah, the depth thing's certainly a bit of an issue here, but I do like what they have Kilgore leading the way. 56 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss for him. 1 sack, 3 pass breakups. They bring in Zakai Baker from East Carolina. 86 total tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a QB hurry for him. He was really solid. I think he's a good player. Akil Washington, he's a very versatile player. That's what I'm going to call him. I'm going to say he's a versatile player. They could do a lot with him. Not sure exactly what his role is going to be, but again, that versatility is solid to have. 39 total tackles, 5 QB hurries, 3 pass breakups for him last year. The depth is limited. Certainly some younger guys that didn't register a ton of snaps last year, but Kilgore's a good leader, and Barker should be a solid partner for him on that linebacking duo.
I moved to the secondary for SMU. Deuce Harmon, he was a pretty good starter last year, being consistent versus the run and in coverage. Jalen Davis-Robinson was the top rotational corner, seeing plenty of reps. He was poor in coverage, though. Thought he was solid in run support. Marcellus Barnes was a pretty impressive player early in the year for Syracuse before getting hurt. So I think they're going to be all right at corner. William Nettles saw 4 games last year. He'll be on the 2 deep this season. Nickel corner's going to go to Kyron Chambers. He was good in his brief appearances last season, so they're expecting him to keep up the momentum. The safety group returns 2 very impressive veterans, Isaiah Nwakubia, one of the nation's most elite DBs of his consistent play. Great run defender, has been phenomenal in coverage over the last couple of seasons. Then his tango partner, Ahmad Moses, he was just as good in coverage. Also stout versus a run. Not at the same level of his dance partner, though, but still very good. Good group here. Corner group I certainly worry about just a little bit because some of the guys that are coming in are either younger or weren't as good last year. I think they'll be all right, though. I think safety is also probably one of the nation's best duos with Moses and Nwakubia. What do you think of this secondary, Nick? That's certainly the strength for me.
Yeah, secondary was average last year, 79th in the nation, 225 yards per game. But I think it's a strength this year, like what they have here, and like what they return and get that experience back, plus the one guy they added in Barnes from Syracuse. I think he could transition and be solid for this team. When you look at the guys they return, Nwakubia was really good for this team last year. 100 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3 picks, 3 pass breakups. He's a really good asset to get back. Same thing with Ahmed Moses, 73 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 picks, including a pick 6 in there, 6 pass breakups, 2 stellar coverage guys, really good tacklers as well. I like that. Kale Sanders comes back as well, 48 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1 sack, a pass breakup for him. He was solid. Deuce Harmon was really good for this team in coverage, 31 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a pick, 8 pass breakups. Jalen Davis-Robinson was better at tackling, weaker in coverage, 22 total tackles, 3 pass breakups for him. And then Kyron Chambers as well comes back with 10 total tackles and a pass breakup. They're going to be kind of moving around and see what he can do at nickel. Overall, I think the secondary will improve. They'll take a huge step forward here and kind of balance out some of the weaknesses on the defensive line. I think they should be a top 50 unit come the end of the season. I think they project to be pretty solid once it's all said and done. I like the piece they have here, particularly at safety.
I went ahead and gave them a B with this verdict. I think the Mustangs defense has been a highly impressive one for a couple of seasons now under Lashley, but now they're going to be tested following the loss of most of their front 6. Not all that confident in what they have stepping in the key roles at defensive line and linebacker. I certainly like what the secondary is going to provide, as I think that they can be strong, led by that elite safety group in the back end. Look at the schedule and the prediction for SMU. They're coming off a great season. I saw them nearly win the ACC in its debut year before getting humbled in the CFP. Most of that offense is back with Jennings at the helm. But again, he wasn't great on the road last year, and his supporting cast is not going to be as deep, while the defense is destined to take a step back in the trenches. I don't think SMU is really going to be all that great this year. They were never dominant last year. The only easy victories really came versus the far weaker competition. And as much as I love the abilities of Lashley, I think a 7-9 win campaign is in the cards. Don't think they're going to compete for ACC crown. Last year, that's what you saw, Nick, is they avoided some of the bigger dogs in the conference, if you can really say that. I know against Clemson they made a showdown late, but they weren't really all that good in that game, and Clemson almost blew it. So and they probably should have lost to Duke. Duke missed like a 20-yard field goal to win the game. Louisville was a tough game. Even seen it week 1 against Nevada, week 0 that is. So I just never was very impressed with this team at times. The Boston College game is a good example, one that potentially could have been a loss for them. So I don't think this team's going to be all that good this year. I could be wrong, but I think 7-9 wins is going to be the approach.
Yeah, this is a team that's very intriguing. I have them at 9 wins, but I really don't feel good about it. The schedule this year is a lot tougher than it was last year, although last year's schedule had a lot of really easy games. They won that game at Louisville, which is probably their toughest game on the schedule before they ended up playing Clemson. Of course, that BYU game aged pretty well, even though they lost at home in that one. The schedule's tough this year, right? Baylor, TCU are two tougher in-state opponents out of conference. Intriguing matchups there. I think they can find a way to win that Baylor one. They'll struggle at TCU. I think they'll struggle at Clemson. They'll struggle against Louisville as well. I have them beating Miami. That's more for me. I'm not sold on Miami. But outside of that, I think the rest of the schedule does have the wins there for this team. They were an intriguing team last year. That week 0 game against Nevada on the road, they were like 25 point favorites, 20 to 25 point favorites, and they only won by 5 points, and they struggled all night in that matchup against Nevada, which I think was a concerning sight for things to come. The offense certainly got higher into gear as the season went on, as did the defense. I think that's how it's going to go again this year, where they might start off slow. They might struggle week 1 against that weaker opponent, East Texas A&M. They might struggle against Baylor on September 6th. But come October, this offense will be rounding into form. I like Rhett Lashley. I think he's a great coach, and I'm gonna fire my shot here and say he'll probably be hired and lured away to Arkansas come the end of the season. The allure of coaching in the SEC is very hard to pass up. Of course, he played quarterback there in the early 2000s, so that's gonna be my first kind of hot take I'm throwing out there. I think another steady campaign from him. He's a really good coach. He's been really putting something together here at SMU. A really solid, back-to-back 11-win campaigns. Should be in line for another, 9-win campaign here. This team is not phenomenal, but the schedule's pretty easy, and I think they do have a way to win against some of those tougher opponents like Miami on the schedule. This is a very weird team for me. Yeah, I'm not hot on them, but I'm also not cold on them. They're a very odd team with some of the way that they're set up on the defensive line and the offensive line, as well as the running back room. Interesting team overall. Curious to see how they play out here. I could see this team, winning 10 games, but I also see them winning 6 games. A very Jekyll and Hyde type team that is going to be certainly intriguing to watch, and I'll be keeping an eye on. Certainly tuning in September 6th, one of the better games of week 2.
Yeah, I certainly think Lashley's a heck of a coach. The amount of players that transferred over from Miami when he came to SMU was pretty staggering. You got like Derek King's now on staff for a couple of seasons now. So this is a guy that players love, and he's obviously very successful. He's a heck of an offensive coach. I know SMU probably doesn't want to let him go, and I'm not sure if he's going to leave in the immediate future either, Nick. So I think SMU is a good thing going, and this will be another good season for him. I certainly think they can contend for many years at the top of the conference as long as he's hanging around.
Yeah, I think it's certainly if he stays, I think they'll be a very strong team. I just think that, when you get an opportunity to go to the SEC, those opportunities don't come around a lot, especially at your alma mater. I think there'll be a really very enticing offer for Rhett Lashley. I'm expecting Arkansas to fire Sam Pittman in this season. I feel like that's kind of a foregone conclusion unless something radical happens up there in Fayetteville. I just think he's a dead man walking. I think Rhett Lashley would really reinvent that offense that's shown some stagnation in Fayetteville, like he's done with his SMU offense. It's been absolute dynamite since he's taken over.
For today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.